Dr. Rabinowitz.
Hey, Marjorie, good to see you.
So good to see you. How are things?
Things are great. However, you have me worried because we've known each other a long time.
We have.
You're
What's
wearing
going on?
your red closing suit. So does that mean you're going to try to close me on something today?
Okay, you definitely know me too well, but come on, Dr. R. Based on our last meeting, I felt like you were really ready to move forward with the CoolSculpting system, so I wouldn't be wearing my red closing suit today if I didn't have the Master Services Agreement. Are we ready to sign and move forward?
Well, I've been doing some thinking since our last meeting, and you encouraged me actually to go onto our physician locator and just see how things looked. And what I found is that there are a lot of practices in Omaha. This is not a very big city, and I was very surprised to find that this market seems really overcrowded. After seeing that, it just feels like I missed the boat.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say that. So I will tell you this story about a specific market being too crowded with CoolSculpting. We do hear that story each and every day from physicians across the country in different markets. I think two really critical elements to consider. The first thing that I'd ask you to look at is that we do know that there are 22.5 million people that have raised their hand and said, enough is enough. I'm looking for a way to treat unwanted fat. And if those people really, those are the types of people that want to get a procedure done, but they don't even know that there's one out there, they don't know where to go or who to talk to. One interesting thing about that number of 22.5 million is that's actually twice that of those that are seeking toxins and fillers.
Really?
So, yeah, so the market is enormous and the market is definitely untapped. The second thing I'd ask you to consider is that many of those 22.5 million people who are raising their hand, Dr. Rabinowitz, those are actually your patients. If there are people out there that really want to reduce unwanted fat, actually hear that there's a non-invasive way to reduce that fat, they're gonna go someplace to get it done. And unfortunately, when that patient goes to another physician, you do run the risk of actually losing that patient to your practice. What I will tell you is that there are patients that are currently in your practice today that are seeking CoolSculpting and are going to get CoolSculpted. So that's the first thing to consider. But to answer your question directly about that this area could potentially be too crowded with CoolSculpting, what I really want to execute to you today is that the more quote unquote crowded a CoolSculpting market is, actually the more revenue that you're going to experience as a practice. So let me tell you how I'm actually going to prove that. Okay. So did I tell you yet about CoolConnect? I'm doing a little pop quiz today. I can't remember. Did I tell you about that yet?
Yes, I do remember, I think. Let me see if I have this right. So CoolConnect, you said, is a connectivity platform that's built into the system already that I think allows your practices to measure and analyze certain data.
That is exactly what it is. Wow, I'm a little proud of myself for explaining it the right way. That's exactly right. So CoolConnect is that connectivity platform that's already built into the system that allows us to really analyze and measure the success CoolSculpting has in your practice. And here's an example of a report.
Great.
What's interesting about this platform is that it also allows you and me to analyze the impact having dozens of CoolSculpting systems has in a given city, which I think is exactly what you were kind of concerned about, correct?
Yes, that's exactly my concern.
Okay, so we're here in Omaha. I think you would argue it's probably a smaller size city, correct? So what I wanted to show you is actually the data surrounding Sacramento. So Sacramento is, I would say, similar in terms of the smallness of the nature of Sacramento. So in Sacramento, what's interesting is that in 2012, they actually had 7 CoolSculpting systems in that area. By 2014, that number, as you can see here, had more than doubled to 15 systems. So you can imagine the early adopters of CoolSculpting started calling us saying, what's going on? There's all these other practices that are buying CoolSculpting. They were understandably concerned that they were going to have to doubly compete for patients. Can you blame them?
No, that's exactly what I would expect.
And what was interesting is what the data shows is that when the number of CoolSculpting systems in Sacramento doubled, the revenue growth per practice went up 2 times.
Wow.
Yeah, 2 times. And the additional revenue growth from a monetary perspective above and beyond what they were already making went up by over $76,000 just by doubling the amount of systems. Again, that's $76,000 above and beyond what they were already making.
Wow. So what you're saying is that the more systems that are in an area, the more money I can make?
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I'm saying. So one of the unique differences that I want you to always remember about CoolSculpting is that we are never going to make a claim about the success of our product in the marketplace, Dr. Rabinowitz, because we are always going to show you the concrete, actual data, like we do here with CoolConnect, like we do here with our verifiable data. So this phenomenon is not just occurring in small cities. In fact, it's occurring in cities all across the country, especially in mid-sized cities.
Okay, what kind of cities are you talking about?
Okay, well, so let's take Philly. Would you agree, sort of a mid-sized city?
Sure.
So in 2012, the amount of CoolSculpting systems in that area were 19 systems. And by 2014, that number had more than tripled to 57 systems. So you can imagine our customers were calling us getting rightfully concerned. But when you look at in that time frame, what actually happened from a revenue growth is that the revenue growth went up by 1.5 times for those practices in that area. Now I want to spell that out from a monetary perspective, revenue growth, is that in that 2-year period when the CoolSculpting systems tripled, the amount of additional revenue that they were making went up by over $95,000.
Wow.
And again, that was just by tripling the amount, right? Crowding the marketplace.
Right,
So you
right,
can see
right.
where I'm kind of coming from here.
So what were they doing to be so successful with that revenue number that you showed me?
That's a great question. They were doing a variety of things, but I think from a very high level view, the way to think about it is the more CoolSculpting systems that were going in this area by nature, the greater CoolSculpting marketing that was going in. And once you put CoolSculpting marketing both in the practice and out, what do you think happens? Greater brand awareness, which adds up to more patients in those Philadelphia practices.
Right.
So it kind of all adds together. So again, phenomenon's happening all across the country. We've got a big city. We've got LA as another great example. LA being a huge market for the aesthetic industry. In 2012 to 2014, the amount of CoolSculpting systems tripled.
Wow.
So do you want to take a guess on what the revenue growth?
Based on the trend, it seems like it might go up.
You better believe it went up. So in that 2-year period, when the CoolSculpting systems, they added 69 more systems into that LA area, the actual revenue went up 1.5 times.
Wow.
But here's what I really want you to look at. It's very interesting. In 2012, the total amount of revenue that CoolSculpting practices were making was $157,000. Okay? By 2014, when the total amount of systems in the LA area was 180 systems, the average revenue per practice was $232,000. Again, just by adding more CoolSculpting systems.
Wow. And I see where you're going with this, and it's compelling data. I guess I just want to share with you that I have been burned by other systems, and I'll use an example of laser hair removal. So I was an early investor, and everybody got on board at that time. And all of a sudden, I had to lower my prices in order to compete in that market, which really cut into my profitability, which really is part of my hesitation moving forward. And so while this data looks great, and I really want to believe it, I'm not quite sure I trust that I'll be able to get the value.
No, that's a very salient point. Hair removal is actually a really great comparison to us. If you remember 20-something years ago in that hair removal marketplace, it kind of became a free-for-all. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, as you said, the more hair removal systems that went into a marketplace, the more you had to drop your price just to get a really small part of that market share, and it really became a commodity. So CoolSculpting, to help prevent this, has created a program to maintain the value of that brand.
Wow, how do you do that?
Okay, so we do this by something that's really unparalleled and very unique in our industry. It's called our MAP policy. So MAP stands for Minimum Advertised Price. So what we asked our accounts to do is to comply with our MAP policy, and if they comply with our minimum advertised price, they get a 50% discount. So let me walk you through how this works. So our cards per cycle are priced at $250. But for those accounts who comply with that minimum advertised price, they get the cards per cycle at $125. So in North America alone, we have 1,963 practices who have CoolSculpting systems. So do you want to take a guess on how many of those have actually complied with our MAP policy?
I have no idea.
Okay, 1,961. So we have a huge incentive. It's almost everyone, right? And can you understand the value of why?
Absolutely. Well, there's plenty of patients out there, but I would hate to have something to cut into my profitability, so it seems like the incentive is to maximize profitability.
That is exactly right. I will tell you, we take our MAP policy incredibly seriously. We have a team of sharks at our corporate office at CoolSculpting who proactively go after any offenders of our MAP policy so that we can make sure that, number one, we're maintaining the CoolSculpting brand, and on your end, we're maintaining that CoolSculpting franchise that you believe in and that you've bought into. So going back to your original question about this area being too crowded with CoolSculpting, I'd like to ask you this. Have you ever heard of the phrase, a rising tide raises all ships? The idea that when an economy is performing well, everybody gets a lift?
Yes, wasn't it Reagan that said that?
It actually was. And it was originally coined by JFK to describe the idea that when everybody's working for one common good, everybody benefits. CoolSculpting, based on this verifiable data, holds that same principle. The more CoolSculpting systems that are in a given area, the more CoolSculpting practices, by nature, there's more CoolSculpting marketing that's going both in-house as well as out-of-house. What does that lead to? Greater brand awareness.
Yeah.
What that adds up to is more patients in your practice. And here's the kicker. What I'll tell you is that a lot of people feel like the marketing that we're discussing are, big billboards or those ESPN radio shots and ads. But actually, when you look at the data, it's not those big things. It's very simple, tried and true and easy marketing ideas like cool events and Facebook and Twitter. So we went over a lot of information. Feel like I answered all your questions. I'm wearing my red closing suit. I don't want it to let me down today. So are we ready to move forward with signing the MSA?
You have certainly helped qualm some of my fears with moving forward, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I have to ask you though, you have to promise me I'm going to pay this system off.
You are. Let me take you through this. Do you remember a couple weeks back, we went out to dinner, we had that nice bottle of Cabernet. Do you remember you met Mary, who's going to be your practice development manager? Remember her?
Yes.
She looked you in the eye and she told you all the things that she's going to do with you and your team in partnership to develop those 5 steps to get you to 200 grand as quickly as possible. And you remember that night, we showed you dozens of these Cool Connect reports that showed you and proved to you that every single office and every single practice here in Omaha had paid off their system in 5.3 months. Dr. Rabinowitz, I ask you this. Have you ever purchased or even heard of an aesthetic system where 25% of all of those practices purchase more than one system? Again, in all due respect, if the system wasn't being paid off, would 25% of all of our accounts buy multiple systems?
Touche.
So, are we ready to move forward with signing the MSA now?
I'm getting my pen.
Okay.
Ready to go.
Excellent. I'm really excited. This is
right.
going to be a great franchise for us.